Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to our next session this afternoon as we make our way through the first day of 4 years from now. Remember our hashtag 4 years from now 17. At the moment, apparently, it is trending, not just in Barcelona, not just in Spain, but certainly this part of Europe. Our goal over the next 2 days is basically to make this hashtag go as far as it can go. And literally, we're going to trend across the world. Do you think we could do that? I'm sure, I know you... It's great to have your support. Right, we move on to our next session. Okay, so we're going to jump across from Europe, across Barcelona, going across right over there to China, the gateway to China. The gentleman that's going to make sense of all that for you and share his insights, the gentleman that's worked for Amazon, worked for Yahoo, and right now working for Alibaba Group. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the General Manager, Europe of the Alibaba Group, Mr. Terry von Bibra.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if the microphone is working. It is, so bona tarda. That's the limit of my Catalonian. But I'm here today not to explain to you the differences there so much as the differences between a European startup or large online company and a Chinese one. So very happy to be here. My name is Terry von Bibra. I've been working in the online space for many, many years. Helped to set up Amazon here in Europe. I worked for Yahoo for many years. Worked on Omnichannel in the offline online space for a German department store, Karstadt, and for a little over a year I've been working for Alibaba. Alibaba, as you may know, is a very large company. It's a very complicated company, but here in Europe it is very much in startup mode. That's why I'm very happy to be here today with many other startups. We are a startup with a very large mothership in the background, but nonetheless here in Europe, very much teams comparable in size, dealing with the same issues as any other startup, and a few other ones. So, Alibaba is famous, but it's really only known for 2 or 3 things outside of China. 2 of those things you can see here on the screen. That is our founder, Jack Ma, a very well-known figure, very well-known founder, and our IPO, the 25 billion IPO, which until today is still the largest IPO in history. But we are many, many things that people don't know about, and many other things that people don't really understand. So my hope today would be to try to explain some of these things, give you a little more insight into what we are about, and see if there's some things that might be there of use to you and your work. So first of all, our mission, to make it easy to do business anywhere. I've worked at many companies with different mission statements. Sometimes they change frequently. Sometimes they're very hard to remember, very hard to digest. As I mentioned, Alibaba is a complicated company. We have over 25 different business units. I'll try to give you an overview of those shortly. But there's one thing that ties them all together, and that is actually this mission statement, to make it easier to do business anywhere. This is what started the company, a small group of founders back in 1999 in a small provincial city, or small by Chinese standards, Hangzhou, who discovered that technology, in this case the internet, could help them make it easier for other young people to set up businesses, to start their own businesses, and to participate in cross-border trade, which until then was completely unheard of. Cross-border trade was something for large government-owned companies or large multinational companies, and not for other young people to start up and doing. And that's what they did, that's what they discovered, and it has become the theme that has been consistent throughout our history of the company. We are a very large company, as I mentioned, a few of the numbers, 485 billion annual GMV. This is not our revenue, this is the sales happening on our platform. When we crossed the 3 trillion RMB mark, made us the largest retail platform in the world. Over 10 million active sellers, 443 active buyers, active on our various platforms. Roughly 57 million packages delivered a day, and last but not least, over 1 billion product and service listings on the various platforms. Our platforms, as I mentioned, there's a lot of them. It's about 25 on this page, and to be quite honest, every time I turn around, I got back from China this morning, was having dinner last night in Shanghai, and every time I'm there, I realize there's yet another Ali something. whether it's Ali Music, which is here, or Ali Sports, but there's other ones, Ali Fish, our merchandising platform, not even on the slide. I have to update my slides because we just never stop innovating. But we do have a core business area that is our commerce area. You see here on the left, we started off as a B2B platform, I mentioned Alibaba.com, went into C2C as a defensive mechanism against eBay when eBay came to China. That's what Taobao is, became the largest C2C platform in the world. Then we noticed that a lot of Chinese consumers were looking for quality European and American brands, and they wanted to make sure they were getting the original brand. Searching more and more for that, that's led us to found our site Tmall. Then we realized that lots of brands found it too difficult to do that if they weren't based in China, so we launched Tmall Global. And you sort of get an idea of how this happens. One idea, one business area ends up leading to the next. We also have a very large mobile media entertainment business. Youku is the YouTube of China with about 90% market share. UC Browser is the largest mobile browser in China, as well as in India and Malaysia now. I'm going to come back to that. We have various local services, and then we have our foundational services. Alipay, I will be coming back to, our financial services. Cainiao is our logistic algorithm. Alibaba is not like Amazon and other players. We don't actually own any warehouses. We don't own any trucks. We don't actually do that. What we do is have what I call this logistics algorithm to try to track and optimize the package from order to delivery, but there's many, many different companies who are actually doing the work. There's about 1.4 million people busy today delivering those 57 million packages. They are not employees of Alibaba, and it would not be scalable for us to try to have that many employees growing at the pace we do. What we want to do, though, is to ensure the quality and to optimize working with partners. We're a company whose DNA is very much based on working with partners as opposed to trying to own and control everything ourselves. We have Alimama, our big data platform, and our cloud business, which is growing very, very quickly, which provides a lot of this foundation. We have been very successful in our B2C e-commerce business. As you can see, this is our market share in the B2C space for Tmall. Other companies are there, companies like JD. Amazon is active in China with about 1% market share. Amazon actually sells on our platform in China. So China is very big. We're trying to give you a sense of just how big, and I find this chart makes it very easy to understand. So the expectation is that China's GDP will grow by $2.3 trillion by 2020. What does that mean? If you look at here, the current size in dark orange of a market like Germany and then China, Germany by 2020 is expected to be in total about 2.2 trillion. China is going to grow on top by 2.3 trillion. So to put that in perspective, it means that China is basically going to add another Germany on top. That's the scale of growth that we are seeing. But there's a lot of room for further growth. China's population, about 1.4 billion, 434 million of those people using our marketplace, 620 million online using mobile devices, over 770 million online in total. We see a lot of opportunity for further growth. One of those areas is a project we're working on called Rural Taobao. So there's about 600 million people in China who are not currently benefiting from being able to buy and sell online. And it's very important for us, given our mission to make it easy to do business anywhere, including in rural villages. We have a plan to try to enable 100,000 village-level e-commerce centers. We currently have about 17,000 that have been enabled. This can be a one-person shop. I visited several of them from 8 a.m. in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. They have the ability, though, to have e-commerce products ordered in their store and delivered to that address. These villages are too small for people to be delivered to all of their addresses. It wouldn't be worthwhile for the logistics company. But we have arrangements where they will deliver to that one shop. People come to that shop who do not have internet connections, order products, and then are delivered. We have other villages where people take the produce they are producing, nuts, vegetables, whatever things they're producing, handiwork, and then sell that on our platform via these rural Taobao centers. This is not a big business for us. This is very much more a long-term investment in seeing how we can help the other 600 million Chinese benefit from the incredible change and the quality of life and the quality of consumption that Chinese consumers have experienced in the last 20 to 30 years. When I joined Alibaba, I had never even been to China. I knew nothing about China. I know a lot about e-commerce. I know a lot about working with other companies here in Europe and America. I knew nothing about China. That was part of the attraction for me of taking this role. But since I've been there for over a year now, one of the things I've just been astounded by is the difference in the quality of life and consumption that Chinese consumers have, partly because of the revolution of e-commerce. All of us, Europeans, Americans, and others, many of those in this room, the quality of life that your parents experienced and that you experienced, trains were different, there were no cell phones, houses looked slightly different, but they were as a quality of life that was frankly not that different than the quality of life that we experience. In China, it is a completely different story, from one generation to the next, and e-commerce has played a very big role in that transformation. So, all the developments that are happening there, this is a portion, a area within Beijing, a city district called Chongguanchun, often referred to in China as the new Silicon Valley. In reality, there are many, many centers in China where a huge amount of innovation is happening, where the startup scene is very, very active and vibrant. And that's partly given just the size of the opportunity. You have almost 700 million people online, and you have a startup and you want to innovate an idea, you have a pool of users which you can test your idea, which is incomparable to the pool of users we would have in a market like Spain, or in all of Europe, or even in the US, or even in both combined. This is the third thing for which Alibaba is well known, our famous Singles Day on 11th of November every year. This past year, we did over $17.8 billion GMV in 24 hours. And what was particularly astounding to me was that 82% of that, so about $14.6 billion, was ordered through a mobile device. E-commerce in China is mainstream. Quite different than here. Here it is becoming more and more mainstream. Here it is typically 20, 30, 40% of a website's traffic, 10, 15, 20% of its revenue. That was also the case at Alibaba as little as 4 or 5 years ago. But every quarter, this percentage goes up. On this last Singles Day, up to 82% being ordered through mobile devices. In terms of some of the things we're doing with mobile, so at our gala event, I was just talking about Singles Day. We had over 7 billion interactions during the gala ceremonies, sort of like the Oscars and the Super Bowl combined in the US. You have a huge live audience, 100 million people watching, a lot of stars appear, a lot of things are going on, and it's to kick off our Singles Day, the 24 hours. During that interaction, over 7.4 billion people interacting with their mobile devices to things that were going on the TV show. Over 8 million people have purchased items and engaged or shopped virtually on our Buy Plus virtual reality platform. This is still very early days, like it is everywhere, but again, the way we're approaching is not as a gag, but much more so, is there certain times when that is a better shopping experience that someone might not otherwise be able to use. We are also doing quite a bit in what I call omnichannel, but which is China is often referred to as O2O, offline to online, online to offline. So during this event, we had over 30,000 physical offline stores participating in the game with over 70 million people playing a virtual game that we had done as a promotion as part of the sales event. But that level of engagement happening, that is the scale we are talking about. And we had a fashion show, I'm going to come back to that in a second, where we're really trying to combine offline and online, and had over 6 million people streaming that fashion show and ordering products while they're watching, again, on their mobile device. So when I say e-commerce in China really is at another scale altogether, you can see here the percentages of people's preferred device for purchasing an item online. Typical, say here in Europe, 4.5%, in the US, 5.2%, but in China, 22.3%. So 4 to 5 times the percentage of users, our consumers' preferences here for what device they want to use, 4 to 5 times higher in China. When I try to explain this, I think one of the most interesting or easy ways for me to understand it is, if I go and visit a colleague at our headquarters in Hangzhou, where I was last week, and they have a big computer screen on their desk, they have their keyboard, they have a mouse, and I asked them a question. Could you show me this? Could you look up this number for me? And they've got this huge thing right in front of them. They don't touch it. They reach in their pocket, they pull out their cell phone, and they look up the information. Because that's where the information is. That's online. That device is sitting there because the company bought it and they used it to build spreadsheets or something. That's not what is top of mind for a Chinese person when it comes to online. It is absolutely the mobile device. 69% of Chinese consumers versus 46% in the US have purchased a product through their smartphone. So when you see our 82%, Alibaba in this case is even ahead of the curve. But this isn't really about Alibaba. This is a phenomenon in China overall. And you can see those percentages not very far behind. In China, you use your mobile device for doing literally everything. My colleagues, when they go out for the day in the city like Hangzhou, they always tell me, Terry, I don't have a wallet. I don't carry a wallet. Everything I do, I pay for with my cell phone. From the taxi, to the food, to the coffee, to the movie theater, to things like paying their electricity bill. It's all done through a mobile device. Mobile payments in absolute terms, almost 50 times larger than the amount of mobile commerce being done in absolute currency terms in the US. Alipay is a good example of why this is not about building something, doing great marketing, and having it grow because you found a good way to market your product, to market your app, to market your startup. Alipay, which is part of Ant Financial. Ant Financial is now actually a separate company from Alibaba. The two were together and very closely connected still, but it's actually a separate company now. Ant Financial built this app called Alipay because there was a need to make this work for people who were trying to purchase something online. They noticed the need and developed a solution for the need. And I can't stress this enough, how often I see startups, they come up with an idea. I know there's a lot of criticism sometimes here in Europe especially. A lot of startups are copying someone else's idea. And if you do that better, then that's fine. More power to you if you can improve on someone's idea. That's how things have been working for thousands of years. I do get frustrated when I feel that someone's missing the point about what is the actual marketing value proposition of your startup. What are you trying to do better? The great startups in this history of the last 20 years that have become great companies, the Googles, Airbnbs, Amazons, and others of this world, similar to the story I told you about Alibaba's foundation. These were all companies where the founders said, I've discovered this technology, I have this idea about a technology that is, I think if I use this technology in a certain way, I can make the world a better place. That might sound optimistic or naive, or you can call it whatever you want, but that is absolutely the founders that I know, the founders that I've worked with, that's what they cared about. They did not care about becoming big, valuable companies. They became big, valuable companies because they did it so well. So the example of Alipay here. In China, 10 years ago, if you wanted to pay your rent, if you wanted to pay your utility bill, you had to take off a half day from work and go stand in a very long line in the bank to pay your utility bill, your electricity bill. And then someone comes up with an app that says you can pay that while you're at work or standing on the street waiting for a cab or a bus in about a minute. So that value proposition was so strong. There was no need for marketing. There was no need for doing anything clever. If you found a solution that was so easy to something that was so difficult and painful, in this case of China, for hundreds of millions of people, how could you not succeed? Well, you could still screw it up. Luckily, we did not. But that's the sort of scale in China that you can get, but it's the same idea in any other country. If you can find a solution that really makes something easier for people to do, that's what matters. That's where the sweet spot is. That's what, in my opinion, a lot of startups should be focusing much more on. There's so many startups now, there's so many offerings out there that I realized that it was much easier when we got started. It was much easier 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But I am confident we are very much at the beginning of all this. We are very much at the beginning of what we're doing. And it's focusing on those ideas where you can make a difference that makes really a difference for consumers. I'll never forget an interview I saw once with our founder, Jack Ma, and someone was asking him, says, Jack, why do you guys do so much? You're doing so much. You've got cloud and e-commerce, and now you've got Ali Pictures and Ali Sports. Now you're doing something with the Olympics. Why do you keep doing so much? Why don't you just focus on one thing? And he says, you don't understand what we're trying to do. We're not trying to do e-commerce. We're not trying to do this. We're using something called, he says, when Thomas Edison was innovating, he was using something called electricity. And no one said to him, you can only use electricity for lighting rooms. You could use electricity for anything. And we see what we're doing the same thing is, like many companies, we're using this thing called the internet. And you can do anything with it. So to try to have companies be focused into you're only allowed to do one thing, we find very, very limiting. But everything you do should be focused on where you're trying to make a difference. And in our case, that is trying to make it easier to do business anywhere in the world. There's some very interesting trends going on right now in e-commerce in China. One of them is what you see here on the right, live streaming. I've found this fascinating. I have to admit, when someone told me about it, I said, oh, that's a gag. Why is there some guy walking around with his cell phone? We did a press conference, we were launching something, and this guy was with his cell phone in my face the entire time. And I thought, like, it's clearly not a professional film guy who's all the time filming. I said, what is he doing? Terry, we're live streaming this press conference to the storefront. So it wasn't being live streamed to all of China, but anyone who was visiting the store was watching our press conference. I personally would not have found that interesting, but I'm not the target audience. I'm not the 25-year-old Chinese consumer in Shanghai. We did another event far up north in Finland, in Rovaniemi, where Santa Claus comes from. We're deep in the northern on the Arctic Circle, literally on the Arctic Circle. And we had a lunch of clients and lots of guests, and then we started filming it, and a lot of Chinese pop stars who had been flown in from Shanghai were there dancing, and the entire thing was in Chinese, and I invited a lot of clients from Europe to be there who do not speak Chinese. And I thought, what are we doing? And then I realized, we're doing this for the Chinese consumer, who is fascinated to see his favorite pop stars on the Arctic Circle where Santa Claus, and Santa Claus did make an appearance. So it's about what is the target audience. Trying to understand e-commerce in China is not about applying our standards of what we think is best practices, but trying to figure out what the Chinese consumer wants. And that is changing so fast, and it's often so different than what we're used to. This live streaming thing, as you can see here, the image on the right, I mentioned this fashion show we did. I watched it for about an hour, and again, not being the target audience, I guess my eyes started getting tired because the amount of activity, comments, purchases, and every time a model walked down the stage, a window would open up, and then you could purchase immediately the products that she was wearing on the stage. It was a huge offline, online event, the sort of thing that I personally wouldn't have thought would have been successful, but again, for the Chinese consumer, was absolutely right in the golden circle of what they were looking for, what they wanted to engage with. I talked a bit about virtual reality. You can see some examples here. It's obviously hard to explain that until you try it out yourself. Again, the way we see things like virtual reality, other trends, is very much about not trying to use a technology because it's a funny technology, but to see if that technology can help us do what we're trying to do better. And if it does, we'll invest more, we'll build it out, we'll invest in making that an even better experience, and if it doesn't, we'll do something else. Because the technology is completely subservient to the goal of what we're trying to do, which in this case is to create a better, more compelling shopping experience for people who might not be able to go to the flagship store in Shanghai, who might not be able to go to a great offline experience because of where they're living in China, and bringing that experience to them. That's the idea behind, for us, virtual reality. So what's next? There's a lot of trends going on right now in China. Some of those trends we see here also. Some are similar, so social buying, community buying, clubs buying, a lot of things that you've seen here, some we have not. I think the one difference that I notice is how quickly these things change, how quickly there might be a demand for a certain kind of product and how quickly that demand moves away and suddenly there's a new demand. Trying to keep track with that pace is very, very challenging. What I would encourage everyone here who has their own startup, anyone who is investing in a startup, thinking about doing a startup, or already building a successful startup business is, think about China. Think about coming to China with your idea. Think about testing your idea in a marketplace with 700 million people online. Either because you think your offering could be interesting for the Chinese consumer, at which point we're very interested, but maybe you also just want to test it out because you want to test your idea at scale. You want to test it at a scale that if it can work at that scale, then you can bring it back into your home market and say, now I'm going to use those learnings and insights from testing my product in China to see how it could work here. But I would very much encourage anyone, think about China. China is the world's second largest economy. It is on a very clear path to become the largest economy in the world. The degree of sophistication in e-commerce, in shopping, in mobile is astounding, and it's a place where I think all companies will have to become engaged. I think it's better to do it sooner, to test your ideas, to get learnings, to get insights. My one caution would be it is not easy. Do not assume it is easy. Do not assume it is quick. It is difficult, complicated. There will be setbacks. And so it's very important that you try to work with companies who you can partner with for the long term. If you're not interested in the long term, then I would not suggest you even go. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, I think we will take those right after now. Thank you. If you speak loudly, I will repeat your question.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. So I'm coming back fresh from Shanghai, and I had the opportunity to be at Keynote, and they were talking about the e-retail industry there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they mentioned was that the Western e-retail companies are not able to adopt the Chinese consumers. For example, he said the Chinese consumers like to have, a lot of information on a screen, and the Western e-retail companies have very clean, websites.
Yeah.
So it's not something that goes well with them. I find it difficult to believe that big e-retail companies in the Western world do not know how to adapt to a Chinese consumer. So what are your insights on that?
Sure. So I'll repeat the question. The first question was talking about a very important point, which is the difference between best practice e-commerce when it comes to the amount of information you put on a page. And the second point was, do I really believe that it's really so hard for big, successful Western companies to be able to come and succeed in China? So to the first point, I actually have a slide, I didn't bring it with me today, putting side by side a typical Western product detail page, which is kind of the ultimate e-commerce page, the product detail page, what we would all be used to. This is a page with very clear information, very clear rules about what is where, a lot of white space, and maximum 3 pages, 1 above the fold, 2 or 3 beneath the fold, and that's it. That is the best practice that many of us working in this space for the last 15 years have established, because that's what consumers here want. You take that same page to China, and the Chinese consumer will be bored. He will leave. He will think, this is not a real product. Where's the information? Clearly these guys don't know what they're doing. And if you were to take a best practice Chinese consumer detail page, which I could then show you and have about 20 pages below the fold, and would go on and on forever. It would have pictures of the factory. It would have pictures of the founders, 1880 in a small Swiss village. Might even have pictures of the founders' report card. And every kind of information you could ever think, which here would be considered cluttered and boring and bad, the Chinese consumer requires. Why? Because for him, that's proof that it's the real thing. This is the real product. It comes from that factory in that little village somewhere in the mountains in Spain. And they want to know that, and they want to be convinced. So a lot of the work when a Western brand goes to China is that teams there have to build for them these pages, because they do not exist in what they're doing here in their own e-commerce offering with their own sites here in Europe or on other players. To your second question, is it really true that a Western company that is very successful here cannot succeed there? Absolutely. It is harder to succeed than it is to succeed. I work with many, many of the top brands in the world, some of the largest brands in their sector. We're very fortunate to have many of these brands already on our platform, and I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to help bridge between their expertise here, their teams in China who are experts in the Chinese consumer, that is a prerequisite, with our teams in China who are experts in e-commerce and the consumer in China, and still trying to build the bridge between those two worlds, and it is very difficult because the worlds are just very, very far apart in terms of how you manage these things. Do you manage it from here, from your headquarters? Try to control the team in China? Do you give the team in China complete autonomy? Both can go completely wrong. Do you fight trying to bridge of that? And then really trying to understand your product here and how it works here, your value proposition here, your positioning of your brand here versus the right positioning of your brand there. They are not identical. They're often quite different. And you have to get into the details and try to work that out. It's a learning process. It is possible, but it is not easy. I know we're strained for time, but I see one question here.
You mentioned the advice you gave was to test the idea.
Yes. Yes, so the question was, for anyone not being able to hear, how would that work for a small startup here to actually go to China and test their idea? So there's different ways to do this. Again, none of them are easy. I'm not here to ever say that we have an easy solution. What we have is an incredibly fascinating, compelling opportunity. So there's quite a few startups in our hometown in Hangzhou, quite a few Western startups, where they have moved there. They're working with our teams. We have a very good cloud business where we often sometimes support startups, give them support from our cloud business, and find ways to give them support. We can't do this all the time. It's very time consuming for us. But it's about this idea of, doesn't have to be with us. The point is, a lot of these companies go there, they try to set up a business there, they start testing it, they work with local colleagues. There's a way to do it, but you've got to be willing to really jump into a big ocean of cold water and then start to learn how to swim. And if never would it be you go there, localize your app into Chinese, and off you go. That would be the worst possible idea. But the opportunity is great. I know I'm being told I need to leave the stage, so I will. If you have questions, I will be available afterwards. Thank you very much.